actually not going to talk very much about trucks, or in fact about Volvo, and I'll explain why as I go through. But a little bit about Volvo first of all. This is the Volvo group. You won't see any cars here. The cars is actually a different company now. But this is what we do: trucks, including Mack trucks, buses, and construction equipment. And I work in an IP group, intellectual property, so we're kind of more on the back end of innovation. But my history is very much as an innovation manager, which I'll show you as we go forward. And I get to work with these yellow and black things, which are kind of fun. I'll be driving these in a couple of weeks' time, which should be even more fun. But like I said, I'm not going to talk much about Volvo. What I'm going to talk about is this topic. So the reality of innovation initiatives in large corporate organizations. So I'm interested to know in the room, how many of you are actually involved in such a thing? In an innovation program, or okay, so everybody, pretty much, that's good. Or almost everybody. And actually a subtitle to the whole presentation is this, which actually I didn't put in the program because it almost sounds a bit negative. But this is what I'm going to talk through over the next 30 minutes or so. My feeling is that innovation initiatives fail quite often, much more often than we're really told. You won't hear too much about that at the conference. Okay, everybody's coming now, that's good. And the reason that I'm equipped to talk about this is my history. So a little bit about where the talk comes from. Then I've got 5 talking points to work through and a bit of a wrap up, and hopefully plenty of takeaways for you. I'm more than happy to talk in lots of detail about anything you see later on. Just grab me, especially when there's some beer around in the cocktail session later on, and I'll talk for as long as you want. So let's see. This is not just to tell you what I've done, but more to put things in context. And I'm going to talk slightly slowly because people are joining. But this is what I've done in my career. And you can see I've been with a company called Bombardier Aerospace for most of it. In fact, most of my background is in aerospace. And then more recently, I've worked for some other companies here. And actually, I've only been with Volvo since January this year. And the whole point of showing this is that I went through a transition here, where I went from being the innovator and somebody who was an engineer and very much involved in product development into what we'll call an innovation manager. And that doesn't mean, by the way, that I'm managing innovators. And we'll touch on that topic as well as we go through it. And what is this thing? So I've been doing it for 10 years now. It's about 10 years as well since I've been coming to conferences like FEI, and I've got lots to share. And I'll be keen to hear your stories later on as well. So this question of what is an innovation manager, and I thought I'd show it this way, what my friends think I do. They hear me talk a lot about ideas, helping people have good ideas, looking after ideas, trying to keep them alive. What does society think I do? They probably think I'm some sort of mad professor. Maybe that's true. What about my peers? Yeah? I think they think I do quite a bit of time daydreaming, coming up with wacky ideas to annoy them with. But I think some of them are also find me a bit scary. They think that I lead the rebellion. What about my boss? I think he hopefully feels that I'm constantly pulling rabbits out of the hat. What I think I do when I'm having a bad day, this is what it feels like. It feels like Sisyphus pushing the stone up the mountain every day, only to find it's at the beginning when I come back into work. Happily, those are only a few of the days, and more often than not, it feels awesome. Being an innovation manager is a pretty cool thing to be in an organization. And to finally, what I actually do, this was the best picture I could find to kind of summarize to me what it feels like. A plate spinner. Now, lots of jobs are multitasking, looking after different things, but I chose this carefully. Plates are fragile. Ideas are fragile. It's about keeping things alive, about keeping things going, about making things flow, and there's only one guy doing it. Being an innovation manager can be kind of a lonely thing. You often feel very alone against the rest of the organization. So, moving on. Getting away from the humor a little bit and what it actually is, I think innovation manager is very much as well about creating this thing that we call sustainable innovation capability. So over the years, I've built this map that I'm about to put on the screen, which to me are the building blocks that need to be put in place to create this sustainable innovation capability. Now, when I moved from Bombardier Aerospace to Swisslog, I remember thinking, okay, I'm going to take everything I've learned at Bombardier and try and do it again at Swisslog. How do I structure that? And this was the map that I drew. And we actually created a traffic light system to say which of these things are green. At the time, there was only one, which was Innovation Manager. I'd just been recruited. Which are amber and which are red. And then let's put the plan in place to actually build these building blocks and create the structure. I'm happy to see people taking pictures. Go ahead and do that. This one always gets lots of pictures taken. And right now, I've kind of taken a bit of a different trajectory. I'm over here in intellectual property management. So that's very interesting for me as well. I'm now no longer the person looking after the complete capability and a person who's delivering a piece over on the side. Welcome, everybody. Okay, I'll carry on. Okay, welcome, everybody. It's arrived. Very, very 30-second recap. I talked a bit about where this comes from. This whole topic is not about Volvo. So if you came to hear about trucks, that's not what we're about. It's about what it's like to be an innovation manager. This is what I've done in my career. At one stage, I transitioned from being the innovator into the innovation manager, and that happened almost exactly 10 years ago. So what I'm going to tell you is kind of some battle stories, war stories about what's happened there. And to be honest, if I was starting again from 10 years ago, there are some things I would do a bit differently. Because my view is that innovation initiatives fail too often. And I'm going to expand on that topic as we go. We had a bit of humor talking about what Innovation Manager is, or more specifically what I am, and then this map, which lots of people take photos of, which is my view of the building blocks that need to be put in place to create a sustainable innovation capability. All right, we're back up to date. So my theory is that innovation initiatives have a life cycle. And if we actually tried to plot that, you could say that on the y-axis, we've got energy, positivity, potential, engagement. So note, I'm not talking about output there. And on the x-axis, we have time. And it seems to me that the life cycle looks something like this. We start off being extremely positive and feeling great. Then there's the sort of realization of reality in that, wow, this is really hard and we don't know what we're doing. And actually, it's hard to make it happen in the organization. We hit a low point and then we build it back up again. And there's a peak, a zenith here, where it's probably got as good as it's going to get. And I feel that that takes kind of 1 to 3 years. And it's not just a feeling. I've been there. I've done it. I've been in this role in 4 different organizations now. And then what happens after that is there's a general decline. Now, is this particular to innovation initiatives? I don't think so. We can all think of situations in the organizations we work for where an initiative comes along, which is the most important thing ever, and it's supposed to save the company. We do it, it's great, and then after that, it kind of gets forgotten. But it does have some lasting residual effect. I think this is not how innovation initiatives are portrayed. Many presentations you'll hear at a forum like this, it's all about the innovation initiative that's going to transform the company forever and have a lasting effect, which is up here and continues. Frankly, that's not my experience. But if this is true, is it a bad thing? Or do we actually understand it and take advantage of this fact? And how could we make it more sustainable so that we don't have this drop-off as bad and we have a bigger residual effect? And finally, if it is true, what does it mean for people like us? People who maybe, and we did a survey before you all came in, who are involved in these innovation programs, perhaps just starting them and thinking, what am I going to do? And gosh, does it mean that I don't have this job after 3 years? Well, having done it for 10 years, I can say that's probably not the case because there aren't many of us around and organizations need us. But there are 5 talking points I'm going to work through over the next 20 minutes or so and tell you my view on each of these. Okay, so the starting point, and there is a Volvo picture, the starting point is that innovation is often described as leaping the chasm. And what that means is, there's this really tricky thing to get across, and you go from idea into reality. I think it's actually kind of the same with the innovation initiative or program itself. Because on the left side, we have theory, and on the right side, we have reality. And the theory is lots of good stuff. We've all read the books. We've all read the white papers. Some of us have read the academic research. We've employed consultants. We've maybe taken some education. We've listened to the thought leaders. We've watched the TED Talks and so on, and the great keynotes at places like FEI. But how much of that really transfers to the other side? Personally, I'm not sure it's so much. Of course, some of it does, but I don't think it's as much as we are actually told. And why is that? And I think the reason is that because most innovation initiatives start with far too many open questions. And just scrolling through those, I won't read them all out. You can read them for yourselves. But how many of these resonate with the situation that you might be in your organization? What does it look like when we're finished? Has anybody ever had an innovation initiative where you knew that at the start? Whereas if you were doing, for example, a Six Sigma transformation, it's pretty clear where you want to get to and when you want to get to it. So, and finally, what is the plan, what's the schedule, and what's the budget? It seems to me that innovation initiatives are somehow treated as this special, mysterious thing, and we don't plan them properly like projects. By the way, people taking photos, anybody wants a copy of the presentation after, just give me a card, give me your email, I'll send it to you. So, what do? We've got one of these slides for each of the talking points, and you can probably tell that I'm talking very much from the heart, from personal experience, so this is just my view. And other people will have other views that maybe differ. But prepare thoroughly, sounds obvious, right? But it's not frequently done from what I can see. How can you commit to doing something when you don't even know if it can be achieved? Innovation initiatives are very much an exploration into the nowhere. We don't know where they're going to take us to, and we experiment. And very often the person leading it is somebody who's never done it before, right? They're learning as they go as well. So what do you do? Actually, let's come to things like this. Talk to people like me. That's what I did at the start. People who've been there and done it. Don't assume you can do better. Why would you? Try and be realistic. Identify and understand your stakeholders. So what do they want to achieve? It's nothing to do with me. Right? If I say where the innovation initiative is going to finish, I'm going to be wrong. It's the stakeholders who are going to own it afterwards that need to say. And even stronger, what do they need to achieve? And understanding this is the key to success of the whole initiative. Scope it with care. What does the finished flag actually look like? Don't describe this utopian world where everybody's going to become an innovator and we're going to be innovating every day and creating wonderful things. Why would you think that? Is there any evidence to say that's true? Be more realistic. And one size doesn't fit all. I remember the very first FEI that one of my colleagues went to, actually, he came back to Belfast, where you can hear that I'm from, and we literally printed out all the presentations on a table and started pushing them around, pushed the stuff off the table that we thought wasn't relevant to us, picked the ones that were, sorted them into topics, and that became our innovation strategy. True story, and we then went and delivered most of them. To continue, plan it like a project. When will it be finished? Do we accept the fact that these things have a finite life and say, okay, we're over the next 3 years going to deliver this, or do we just go into the unknown? Apply KPIs and measurements. If you've ever read books about the Whirlpool transformation, you see that at the start they measured a lot. But what they measured was inputs. How many people are they training? How many workshops are they running? How many ideas are they collecting? Because there's nothing to measure in terms of output for some years. Leave room to experiment and assemble an elite team. Get people in the team, because it's going to be a small team, whatever we do, who have some experience, who know what they're doing. And the final one on this is, because that all sounded a bit boring, right? Plan, be conservative, but actually be the crazy one. If there's anybody in the organization whose job that is, it's the innovation manager, because nobody else is going to do it. Perhaps they're not used to doing it. I went by this maxim for a long time. It got me in some trouble. But it also got a lot of things done and got things accepted that probably would never have been said yes to if we hadn't done that. We heard Dan Heath this morning talking about getting emotional. Touch people's emotions, really important. And suggest crazy stuff and see what happens. I'm going to talk a little bit later about the tolerance of the organization to new ideas. And it's good to throw these things in. If you have something crazy sitting on your desk, don't hold on to it and think, I'm a bit scared what the organization is going to say about it. Find out. If they say there's no way we're ever going to implement that, at least you know. And that helps to decide which way to go further on. Create excitement, motivate people, gather followers, ride the wave. Very quick story. When we were at this point at Bombardier, we put up cryptic messages in the notice boards, invited people to conference rooms. We got them in, we gave them Easter eggs, we gave them pizza, and we showed them all sorts of stories about innovation and what other companies do. And at the end, we said, we're on a journey, who would like to join? And we ended up with about 50 people that we were able to put onto different experiments and projects. And those were the people that delivered quite a lot of the program. Okay, number 2, organizational resistance. It looks kind of daunting, right? A brick wall. In many ways, my experience is this is what we find. The theory, of course, is innovation is a key driver of organic growth, drives efficiencies, and leads to competitive advantage. Who's going to argue with that? One of the keynotes this morning said, imagine if somebody said, what was it? I completely disagree with the theory of innovation. I can't remember the exact words. It sounds complete insanity, right? So nobody's going to disagree with this. But if this is the case, why don't we get buy-in across the organization? Because the shocking truth, believe it or not, is not everybody is into this as much as you. And I didn't find this out until a few years in. You're riding the crest of the wave, high profile in the organization, everybody thinks I'm a great guy. Later on, I suddenly discover, actually, maybe they didn't. Maybe some people don't want it at all, and maybe some people, even behind the scenes, are prepared to try and stop it. And why is that? Now, leading change is exciting. It's like being part of the Rebel Alliance. You can pretend to be Han Solo, and I enjoy doing that. But the problem is there's also the empire, the organization, and if you're not careful, you're going to get crushed because it's not a Hollywood movie. And there's only a few of you. And I saw this in LinkedIn as I was preparing this presentation, thought it was a great slide or a great picture. It can also be kind of scary and lonely. I've been this person at the podium trying to rally the troops at management meetings. Come on, we're going to change, let's go. Who wants to change? I'm not really, not too sure. Who wants to lead it? And all of a sudden it's an empty room. Okay, so reasons for resistance. Lots of people blame middle management. There's quite a bit written about this. I think it's true to some extent, but I think everybody's to blame, and for different reasons. So these are some of the things that I hear people say or feel that I think are the reasons that people resist. We didn't need this before, and we don't need it now. I'm too busy. It's not priority. How on earth can somebody say that if they believe in the theory that we showed 2 slides ago? Right? It just doesn't fit from a rational point of view. It's an emotional thing. I'm not being measured or rewarded by this. This is really common. I'm scared. I don't know how to do this. At Bombardier, we had a company mission, which was just new when we started the initiative. It was to be the supplier of choice of innovative aerospace engineering solutions. It was a big green light to do our innovation program. A couple of years later, where I wanted to use these words as a lever, I asked my VP, where did it come from? Tell me exactly what you were thinking with this mission statement. And he said, to be honest, Mike, we put innovation in there because we thought we should. And we didn't know how to get there, and you're showing us the way. But I don't really know how to get there either. I'm learning this as I go along, right? So there's also this. If you're so high profile in the organization, everybody thinks you're a great guy. Not everybody's going to be too happy with that. Why is he getting all this attention and money thrown at this program when we've got other priorities? And one which I think is really a big problem at the leadership level is that buying into an innovation program is almost an admission of failure. It's almost like saying, we were no good at innovating before, so we need to do this special thing to fix it. And some people don't like that. So, my advice, I feel you have to actually be a bit less ambitious than what the theory tells us. Go around the roadblocks, find another path to success. Don't waste time on the doubters. It's like the 80-20 rule. Rather than spend half your time trying to persuade somebody that they're wrong, just go around them. People are either on the bus or not on the bus, as Jim Collins would write. Swing for the fences. I thought this was appropriate, being in Boston. Find the people who have an urgent need or an impossible challenge. We were very focused on the engineering group in Bombardier, and then at one stage, the purchasing group came to me and said, we've got a big problem, Mike. We need to reduce costs on purchase bill of material. Do you think your program could help with that? You know, is innovation about cost reduction? I said, well, I don't know, let's try. 6 months or so later, we'd identified 5 million of savings every year on the bill of material in the company. It was a massive return on investment, like 10 times what we were spending on the innovation program. And it gave me close alliance and allies with part of the organization and a big success story to use elsewhere. Grow carefully. Another mistake that I've seen several times, start small and stay small for as long as possible. Now that doesn't sound very ambitious, but the problem is, as soon as the stakeholders start to see something good that you're doing, who's heard them say, okay, let's make it grow, let's do it everywhere, we want it in every business unit, we want it now. I met a young lady recently who is in kind of the same position I was in 10 years ago. And she said, Mike, you've got lots of experience in this. I'd like to hear what you think about the things we're trying to do. We want to do this, we want to do that, we want to do this. And I said, that's great. Your list of things to do looks fabulous. How many people do you have? And she said, oh, it's just me, and I'm only working 50%. And it's an organization of 100,000 people. And I said, to be honest, go back to your boss and say it's impossible. Don't kill yourself doing this. You're not going to get there. It's going to fail. So we need to be a bit more realistic. Okay. Number 3, the handshake. I've read this quite a lot over the past 1 to 2 years. It's all over the blogs and LinkedIn. Everybody's talking about execution, how important the back end is to innovation. So it raises the question, which actually is more important, the front end or the back end? I won't ask for a vote, because actually some people also say, well, it's the wrong question, Mike. Right, it's the whole process. But is it? If we consider that going from market need through to commercialization looks something like this, then we could draw a line and say one side's front end and one's back end. And all of that is innovation, actually. But how on earth can an innovation initiative with a small number of people have the ambition to change the whole process for an organization? And by the way, isn't the organization quite good at doing this anyway? If you're in a big corporate, they're pretty good at executing, right? The problem really lies up here. So at Bombardier, I had this issue where I was trying to think, well, whatever we create here, where does it actually fit? We had a pretty strong R&D group, but at the same time, they were saying we're not innovative enough. And I came to the conclusion that really our innovation program fitted here. Its job was to provide something to R&D which was a bit different to what they had before. Whereas at Swisslog, our innovation program went a lot further, and this is where the problem was. We created lots of stuff that the sales and marketing people had said they wanted, and then when we gave it to them, they didn't really sell it. So to me, the thing here is to make a handshake with the organization. Again, it's about having vision. So big organizations are good at execution, so don't touch that. Instead, focus on giving them something great to execute and package it in a way that they want to execute it. Identify and define the handshake interfaces. So at Bombardier, it was with R&D, for example. At Swisslog, it was with the sales and marketing people, the people in the country selling stuff. Absolutely fundamental to achieving any input. And I think this is often why innovation programs fail. They don't have that handshake. They create something, and the organization just doesn't do anything with it. Or create a parallel route to market. So if you've got something really breakthrough, something disruptive that the organization's never going to handle, but actually they still say it's desirable, find another way to deliver it. There are lots of examples of that happening in companies around the world, like with Nespresso at Nestle, very good story, or the Skunk Works or lean startups. And this might be the only way to deliver disruptive innovation in a big corporate. Okay, number 4 is culture. So the theory here, you've probably all heard these ones. Innovation should be part of everyone's job. Foster a culture of innovation. Again, I'm going to disagree with these. Of course, ideally, they're correct. But there are 2 sides to this culture challenge that I've experienced. And I've borrowed a couple of cartoons to illustrate. Give you a moment to read that one. In fact, you might not be able to read it at the back. He says, you get back to that goddamn cubicle and start thinking outside the box. And this is about the tolerance of an organization to new behaviors. Yeah, we're all going to be creative. We're going to run these workshops. We're going to have great ideas. Some people just don't like that. And the culture has been around a lot longer than you have, and it's going to react against it. But of course, some people love it. And this all might sound negative. You can say, is it possible to create this culture of innovation by painting people a different color? Well, maybe, and at least to some extent. At Bombardier, we had, like most companies, an annual employee survey. And these were 2 questions that got asked that I thought were particularly relevant to innovation. And when we were in this program, people in the organization I was mostly dealing with, which was engineering, 500 people, they were answering 50% agree to these 2 questions. So the year we had the most intense activity, I was waiting for the scores the next year as kind of an oil check of how we're doing. And anybody who knows about these employee surveys will tell you that if it shifts by 2, 3, 5%, that's pretty good. The shift was 21% in 1 year. Boom. Whoa, we're really doing the right thing here. But what happens after is that only lasted for a relatively small period of time. My feeling, therefore, is that if you achieve this, it's a case of make hay while the sun shines. You've got all this engagement, you've got all this good stuff happening, the innovation machine is whirring and clicking, start delivering. Deliver as much as you can in the time you've got before something else comes along in the organization that starts occupying people's time. The second one then, the other side to the culture challenge, the boss here says, this really is an innovative approach, but I'm afraid we can't consider it. It's never been done before. So this is about the tolerance of an organization to new opportunities. Because again, momentary stop. This guy told us to think different. Some people say the Apple story is overdone, and we hear too much about Apple. I completely disagree. I think there's so much to be learned about the Apple story. And a tip, Vince Ferron, who used to be with Apple, is speaking at 9 o'clock tomorrow. Don't miss it. Keynote. Really good presenter. And I think this is so true to the success of an innovation program. People need to be thinking different. But the shocking truth, again, is that the organization doesn't want your best ideas. Who's had a great project opportunity come across their table, and they take it to the chief and say, hey, we've got this thing. Look what the innovation program is generating. Shall we go to the next stage? And they go, I'm not sure. Because they're thinking as well, it'll never work. They're thinking, how do I get it bought off by the organization? They're thinking, how's the market going to react? And they find a way to say no. Even the person who gave you the job, and I've been in this situation. So my advice. If you set your goal as being a complete cultural transformation, which is what a lot of the best practice says you should aim for, I think it's asking for trouble. Don't try to make innovation everyone's job. I've tried to do that. You can get to a certain point with it. It doesn't last for long. Other things come along. In a large organization, it's like trying to change a whole city or community. How could you even be so arrogant to think that you could do something like that? Maybe you can nudge them a bit in the right direction. And time is the enemy. If my theory is correct, that these initiatives last for 3, maybe a maximum of 5 years, there's only so much time you have to make that change. So if you want something fundamentally different in terms of innovation, don't spend all your time trying to change the whole organization. I think do it with a small team, or do it in projects. Innovate in harmony with the culture, not in discord. Don't waste your time or effort, but do think different. Demonstrate what can be possible. We heard Dan Heath this morning presenting, and he talked about get emotional. Find a way to show that this idea that you've got that's come across the table from your program is actually going to solve somebody's deepest problem, the thing that's keeping them awake at night. Create environments that foster this and show it's okay. Nurture the people who think differently. My experience is that as soon as you start to create this innovation culture as best you can, people like that come out of the woodwork. I've had people come up to me and say, Mike, what you're trying to create is the company I thought I was joining 20 years ago. Makes you feel you're doing the right thing, and then look after those people and treasure the breakthrough and disruptive ideas. Keep the plate spinning. Ideas are fragile, they die easily. Keep them alive for as long as possible. So finally, the innovation manager role. And we talked a bit about what is it at the start. Hopefully it was a little bit funny. But where do they come from? If you imagine a design engineer and they're progressing through their career, they maybe become a manager. They maybe go on to become chief technology officer if they're good enough. What about a purchaser? Same kind of flow. But where does an innovation manager come from? And they might go on to become Chief Innovation Officer. What's that, by the way? Where does that fit into the organization? What's their role compared to a Chief Technology Officer? And by the way, you don't go from being an innovator to an innovation manager. Nobody, or very few people, are going to have a job title that says innovator. So these people are a bit of like lost sheep. I'm kind of known as being a bit of a maverick in the organizations I've been in. That's why I fell into this role, a misfit, as somebody said this morning. But how do we grow these people? We put them in quite important positions in an organization with a big responsibility, sometimes with not much preparation. And I think that an innovation manager is this kind of person in the early days. And as the program matures, they become more like this. It's very much about being a change agent. And once it becomes mature, to me, it's a bit more of a backseat role. You've kind of done your job. You've put the program in place. Hopefully, the organization is now working for you and executing the ideas into real products. So it's a bit more about being a process owner. And by the way, don't forget to think differently. Be the risk taker. I feel this is something that the innovation manager needs to truly take a lead on in the organization. So how does it feel to be an innovation manager? The negative stuff first, intensely frustrating. They didn't want that idea, or this isn't working, or I've got too many ideas to deal with, right? Spinning the plates. It's a bit lonely, to be honest. And that's why it's nice to come to places like this, where there's lots of people in similar situations. You can't win. If my theory is correct, that actually what you should do is handshake and give the great opportunity to the organization to execute, when it gets executed 2-3 years down the road, is anybody going to remember the innovation program? It might be defunct by then. So it's somewhat of a thankless thing also. And it's a bit risky, right? You're banking your career on something which may only last a few years. But it is very exciting. You feel like Robin Hood or Han Solo. It's pretty high profile, and it's this spinning plates thing. But moving away from the spinning plates, the best metaphor I could think of in putting this presentation together is it's a bit like a tap and a sink, or a faucet, I should say. I was going to have a beer tap, but I thought that might just accentuate the Irishness of me. But so, and this looks very simple, but it's a bit like identify what is needed, in this case water, or it could be beer. Build the system, create the flow, maintain the flow, keep that tap switched on, use it or lose it. If we don't catch it, it's going down the sink. Grab those ideas, grab the opportunities, make something of them, tell everyone about it, show the success stories, and just don't stop. Keep that wave going as long as possible until the organization decides to do something else. Okay, wrapping up. So let's face facts. You maybe agree with me, you maybe don't. I'm convinced that innovation initiatives end, and actually we should embrace that and use it to our advantage. And what you don't want is, when you get to this point, that they're considered a failure. The guy that I did a lot of this work with at Bombardier, we had a session a couple of years ago reminiscing on it and saying, what difference did it make? And it's a bit like if you've watched Life of Brian with Monty Python, what did the Romans ever do for us? Because we felt a bit depressed, and then one after another, we thought about all this good stuff we'd done. And maybe somebody got promoted in the organization who was a very creative person, or we created an idea or a project or a system or a tool that was still there and still working. But how do we ensure they truly make a difference? So my final advice, one for each of the talking points. The theory, in terms of starting point, we need an innovation program. Sure, of course we do. And maybe you do it once every 10 years. It's very exciting, but you've got lots of questions to answer before actually committing to do that. Takeaway number 2 on organizational resistance. Innovation is crucial to the future of the organization. We all agree, right? Well then, let's take it seriously. Prepare, plan, focus. Which area of the organization are we going to work with? It's not an experiment, by the way. This is important. It's not a learning exercise, and it has to deliver results. Treat it like a project that's going to actually have an output. Takeaway number 3, the handshake. Innovation is all about execution. I think that's true, but for me, it's not the innovation manager's job. The innovation manager's job is to create awesome stuff that the organization wants to execute, and then hand it over to the people who are really good at that. because it's probably not the maverick. And on culture, there are two of these. Innovation should be part of everyone's job. Ideally, yes. But instead, create bright spots, like we heard, I think, Dan Heath say this morning. Great teams, great successes. Deliver it as an output of a project. Foster a culture of innovation, for sure, but give that culture to those who yearn for it, those people who come out of the woodwork, the crazies, the people who've got all the good ideas. And as they come out and you start to build the tribe, others will join and create the momentum. Lastly then, innovation manager role. Anybody who I've scared, who's maybe just embarking on an innovation manager role, do it. It's great. It's different. It's special. You get to think differently. You get to be the maverick. You get to be the misfit. I think it's really important to expect the unexpected. Whenever you're in like an idea session, for example, and some ideas come up, and the organization says, okay, those are the 5 that I think we should take forward. It's your job to look at all the rest and see what's the other stuff that doesn't fit the simple rules of the organization that actually might be the ones that create the new business and actually might be the ones that create something truly remarkable. And a quote, which is actually from me. Innovation theory, best practices and tools are great, but they will only nudge the organization's culture towards where you want it to be. Realizing great projects and transforming key individuals, not the whole organization, is what creates important and lasting change. So I thank you. I'm not sure if we have any time for questions. Yeah. Okay.